Well, good morning. We're going to go ahead and read Scripture. So the Bible's in front of you. It's page 263. 2 Samuel 12, 1 through 7. Caleb's going to read that after he turns the no button on. He says no.
It does?
It's on, upside down.
Okay. All right. 2 Samuel 12, 1 through 7. And the Lord sent Nathan to David. He came to him and said to him, There were two men in a certain city, the one rich and the other poor. The rich man had very many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing but one little ewe lamb, which he had bought. And he brought it, and it grew up with him and his children. It used to eat of his morsels and drink from his cup and lie in his arms, and it was like a daughter to him. Now there came a traveler to the rich man, and he was unwilling to take one of his own flock or herd to prepare for the guest who had come to him. But he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for the man who had come to him. Then David's anger was greatly kindled against the man, and he said to Nathan, As the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die, and he shall restore the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing, and because he has no pity. Nathan said to David, You are that man. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I anointed you king over Israel, and I will deliver you out of the hand of Saul.
Kind of gives a different understanding to you, the man. Yeah. Just a little different. All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate that, Caleb. We are here, and it is Mother's Day. And so happy Mother's Day. You know, one of our distinctives at Grace Life is everyone's a minister. That doesn't mean everyone works at the church. It just means you all, every single one of you, and all of you online, you've been gifted by God with a unique sense of gifting, abilities, talents. Your sphere of influence is unique. And mothers have a sphere of influence that's unique. It's demanding. It's filled with difficult seasons. Not a lot of appreciation from 6-year-olds. You know what I mean? Unless dad is like, sign the card. But I get that. So I know with mothers, you can be caught in the grind and you can just start to question, am I doing, what am I doing? Am I making a difference? I see no fruit. It's just hard. But I read this a year ago. Going to read it again. It's a fun little story from Tony Campolo and his wife when he was on faculty at the University of Pennsylvania. There was these faculty meetings and everyone's, smart and doing big world stuff. And so here's a conversation. When I was on faculty at the University of Pennsylvania, there were gatherings to which faculty members brought their spouses. Inevitably, some women lawyer or sociologist would confront my wife with the question, and what is it you do, my dear? My wife, who was one of the most brilliant and articulate individuals I know, had a great response. She said, I am socializing two Homo sapiens in the dominant values of the Judeo-Christian tradition in order that they might be instruments for the transformation of the social order into the teleological prescribed utopia inherent in the eschaton. She followed that with, and what is it you do? Somehow the person's lawyer or doctor just wasn't that overpowering. Anyway, it is true that you are training future people, leaders, whatever they do, to shape the kingdom of God. And that is way more important than selling chips. So anyway. All right. So we are Grace Life. I'm glad you're here. We need to experience God's grace. And as we experience it, we can extend it. All right, and that's part of our deal. And one of our emphasis that we're making this past couple of weeks is of all nations. We're making disciples of all nations. Jesus said, make disciples of all nations. If you read the gospel, it's pretty clear. He was serious about that. He's reaching out to all these people that, like the Pharisees would say, should not be reached out to. You know what I mean? And so we see all nations. Even in Matthew 1, which we're doing now, the genealogy of Jesus, it's, Canaanite, Hittite, Moabite, and so it seems that God is pretty serious about the all nations thing. All right, but the question today on Mother's Day, we're looking at Bathsheba, is do you think your messed up family prohibits you from enjoying God's blessing? And that's where we're going to go and dig into this. And so we've been taking a look at the 4 women in Matthew's genealogy leading up to Mary, but Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba. Tamar was abused, neglected, forgotten feigned prostitution, a Gentile who had an imperfect plan to participate in God's perfect plan of many offspring for the Abrahamic covenant. Rahab the prostitute, lying, deception, she had an imperfect faith in a perfect God, and her imperfect faith doesn't invalidate her. Ruth was from the wrong place, wrong zip code, wrong side of the tracks, and so for Moab, her imperfect place does not disqualify her. And today we're taking a look at Bathsheba. She was abused, suffered loss, grief, and yet she found deliverance. And so there's a unique story of deliverance in Bathsheba's thing. In fact, Bathsheba's story particularly is why I want to take a whole Sunday on it. Well, just the morning, is that her story kind of mimics the mission of Jesus. In Luke, I love this, when Jesus picked up the scroll and read it in the synagogue at Nazareth, the Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives, sight to the blind, liberty to the oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And you look at Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba, and yeah, the poor, the captive, the blind, the oppressed, I mean, they had significant struggles and suffering and oppression, and yet they all were delivered. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is this. It's kind of random, but it says, "Our God is a God of salvation, and to God the Lord belong deliverances from death." It's great. And seriously, Bathsheba, she was in a life or death situation toward the end of her life after David died, and the Lord rescued her. And so we see God's goodness in that. All right. Okay. So God included Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, Bathsheba for a couple reasons. One, to communicate to the self-righteous people, the Jews, that they need the righteousness of Jesus. And Jesus came in a way that was unique. He came for the people that he came through. He came through imperfect people. He came for imperfect people. That makes sense? I mean, if he came through perfect people, the message kind of has a gap there. Because I'm not included. All right? And so he came for the unrighteous and he came for the self-righteous. All right? Second thing, these women are included so that it would make a trophy and it would highlight the grace of God. Tamar's not the hero of her story. God is the hero of her story. Bathsheba is not the hero of her story. God is the hero of her story. And we need to focus on Jesus, who called himself a friend of sinners. That's his bumper sticker. Is it ours? You know? All right. And so we're going to get into 2 Samuel 11 and 12. Going to kind of zip through the whole story with David and Bathsheba. And it might be challenging. You might think you know the story. But have you read the story from the text? Or have we just allowed other thoughts to shape our mental movie? All right? So there's a roof involved in the story. Here's a joke. Now, I tell you there's a joke, so you know at some point you got to laugh. So your job is to figure out when. No, anyway, that's good. So here's the deal. Tom was asked to watch Bob's family and the house while the family's on vacation, including the dog, the cat, and Bob's grandma. So after the first week, Bob calls home and says, "Hey, how are things going?" And Tom says, "Oh, everything's okay except the cat died." He's like, "What? You could have broken that news to me like softer, like said, well, the cat's on the roof, and then it fell down, and it's at the vet, and it's really struggling, and unfortunately it passed away." Wow. So, okay. So the next week, Bob calls to check in, and Tom says, "Well, how's everything going here and there? How's Grandma?" And Tom says, "She's on the roof." So, anyway, it's a story. Grandma's not on the roof, okay? But this is interesting. In your mental understanding of David and Bathsheba, here are two questions. Who is on the roof and who is naked? Do you think you know? Because I'm wondering if we've read the story wrong. So basically, you know, our Bible study methods are put to the test here. We have the text. We're tempted to shortcut to us today. But really, there's a long runaround here where we're thinking of them and then. what's their culture like, what are those people like, all the context, all the like it was normal for them to bathe. I'll get to this later, but to bathe in almost a public setting, but under their clothes, like you do at a truck stop, like I used to do backpacking. You go in the bathroom and you do the anyway. What does all this do? And then you're thinking about the covenant. What does this have to do with Christ? And then you come down here. So that's kind of where we are today. But here's what we're doing. God doesn't reject the rejects. That's good news, okay? Especially if you're a mother struggling with your significance, you feel that God has rejected you, or you've done A plus B, but you didn't get C. There's hope here in this story. And so we're taking a look specifically at these women. It's interesting. Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba. Tamar is removed from this little genealogical tree here, but men are squares, women are circles or ovals, whatever. But you've got Ruth over here, and you've got Rahab here, and then you've got David and Bathsheba down here, and so we're talking about this. And Solomon was one of their children, not the first. The first one died, but that's kind of where we're going, okay? So, this is also, whoops, hang on. This is also significant. So we have King David here. There's Tamar, Rahab and Salmon, Ruth and Boaz. So David, through Bathsheba, has Solomon, and then all these descendants leading to Joseph. Matthew traces Joseph, the legal line. And then David, through Bathsheba, had another son named Nathan, not Nathan the prophet, just another Nathan. And then all these leading to Mary, and that's the physical line. So that's so Bathsheba is pretty significant. You take her out of the equation and things fall apart. And so that's one of the reasons why she's significant. Okay. But, interesting. Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah, right? I'm not really sure we should call this the story of David and Bathsheba, because that sort of implies that she cooperated. It's sort of like it's a 50-50 story. They both hashed this scheme out. And if you read the text carefully, it is 100% David's fault, sin, problem, and everything else. I challenge you to reread it. Just clear the slate, see what the text says, okay? She didn't seduce David. She didn't pursue David. She's a victim of rape and abuse, straight up. We should call this David and the wife of Uriah, okay? She suffered greatly. One, she suffered abuse by David. So let's go to 2 Samuel 11, chapter 1, and see who's on the roof and who's naked, okay? In the spring of the year, when kings go out to battle, David sent to Joab, his servants with him, and all Israel. They ravaged the Ammonites. We see there's fighting. But David stayed in Jerusalem. So that's the first odd thing. Kings are supposed to be out fighting. It's the season, like a football season, Anyway, and it happened one late afternoon, verse 2, when David arose from his couch. He's not fighting, he's resting. He was walking on the roof of the king's house. He saw from the roof a woman bathing, and the woman was beautiful. Okay, who's on the roof? David is on the roof. Bathsheba is not on the roof. There's no Bathsheba on the roof. Okay? We hear that. We think that. Who's naked? No one's naked. Okay, in this culture, you don't have to be naked to bathe. They long, flowy garments, you get a bucket and a rag, and again, like we used to do backpacking trips, and after 3 or 4 days, you stop at a truck stop, and you walk in, and you do the sponge bath, you know what I mean? Just with a whatever. Sometimes, if you're desperate, a sock or your T-shirt. But anyway, I'm just saying, there was one trip with this one guy that just smelled so bad. We're backpacking, and all the students are like, they were talking to me saying, man, we got like a 12-hour road trip. What, this guy stinks. 12 feet away, what are we going to do? And so I took him to the little bathroom in the truck stop. I'm like, we get to clean up before we go home. You need to clean up. I'll show you how. Let's clean up. And he did. It was great. It was a success story. Anyway, my point is, because Bathsheba is bathing, she does not have to be naked. She's not on the roof. It was pretty common in this culture. They do have roofs that they would hang out on, but if you're bathing, you're in your courtyard. There's walls and there's some degree of privacy. Now, you're thinking, okay, if she's in the courtyard, that's where you would do that because it's relatively protected. But David's house is way high. This is called Area G. It's an archaeological area. I was there like decades ago. But David's palace is way up on a hill, and you can look across the valley, and you could see down into over the courtyard walls. So even if Bathsheba is trying to be as modest as she can, and bathing even under a garment inside her courtyard, David could look and see, hey, there's a woman, and she's beautiful. Okay, so just, and that's not unusual. I read about some missionaries who were in a Muslim area, and they said public bathing is super common there. Long garments, they just do the sponge bath thing, and that's just what they do. But they're still always covered. So, verse 3 goes on. David sent and inquired about the woman. He said, is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? So David sent messengers and took her. She came to him. He lay with her. Now, she had been purifying herself from her uncleanness. Okay, David originally saw, he wanted, and he took. That same pattern shows up with the sin of Achan in Joshua 7. In Achan's own confession, I saw the gold, I coveted it, I took it. Saw, covet, take. That is the model. That is Satan's best model for our sin. See, desire, take. All right? Lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, pride of life. Okay? That just ties all in here. All right? So, but what kind of bath was this? It says she's purifying herself. She hasn't been gardening and just cleaning up. She's following the biblical law for ritual purification, following her monthly cycle, which means she is interested in following the law. She is a pious law keeper. She's not some renegade rebel, right? And also means she's not pregnant at that point. That's significant as the story goes on. And David summons her. She has no choice in this culture. Women are viewed as property. She has no choice. So, saw, coveted, took. He didn't invite. He didn't woo. He didn't lure. He took. Okay, the word means to seize, to take captive, to be captured. All right? And so again, the word rape here fits. We don't normally read this story that way. We try to make Bathsheba bear some of the blame. Well, she shouldn't have been this, and she knew that he'd be looking. And I'm like, do you have the same Bible that I have? I'm not seeing that here. All right? So we need to be aware of the cultural additions to stories and go with the text, even if it challenges the way we've always understood it. Okay, verse 5, she returned to her house, and she conceived, and she sent David and said, hey, I'm pregnant. Super awkward now because she could be stoned for being pregnant outside of that marriage for adultery. But David knows it's not her fault, and so this goes to the next thing, number 2. She suffered as a widow for the loss of her husband. Uriah was one of his best soldiers, one of his mighty men. David sent word. There's a lot of sent. David sent. You kind of get the idea. He's trying to control everything. Do this. You know what I mean? And eventually it just, the house of cards comes down. So David sent word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent Uriah to David. Uriah came to him. David said, how you doing? How's the war going? David said to Uriah, now look at this carefully. Go down to your house and wash your feet. Uriah went out to the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with the servants. Didn't go into his house. Okay, read this. Go wash your feet, but he slept at the door. It seems to be a disconnect. Except wash your feet is a euphemism for sexual intercourse in this culture. Wash your feet, but he slept at the door. You get it? He doesn't spend the night with his wife. But that's what David needs to have happen, okay? So this is all part of David's cover-up. The first plan is to call him home, go enjoy your wife, you'll think the kid is yours. Doesn't work. Uriah's sense of duty and honor puts David to shame. The second plan is to get him drunk. So David gets him drunk. And check this out. Even a drunk foreign Hittite mercenary is acting with more honor than David the king. Yeah, this is getting awkward. And that doesn't work. So the third plan, let's just kill him. Give him a note that says, kill me, and have him take the note to the guys that are going to kill him. It only works because of Uriah's honor to not peek at the note. Otherwise, he would just disappear. Maybe not. I don't know. But you see what I'm saying? So this whole thing shows that David is really hurting at this point. I mean, the first thing is there's a woman who is following the law of God in her cleanliness, and he sexualizes her and just takes her. I mean, before that day, there had been a lot of things going wrong in his heart and mind, right? And here, how do you even go down this path of covering, scent, control, do this, do that? Let's just kill him. And so a pagan mercenary who is following the Lord and serving God is acting with more integrity than the king of Israel. So, verse 11. So Joab was besieging, the men are going up, and they tell him to retreat, and Uriah is killed, and it's interesting then at that point, there's really a telling phrase where David says, well, don't let that bother you. So he's even determining what's right and wrong and what you should be bothered by. So he's way out of line. Verse 26, the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah was dead. She lamented. When the mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house. She became a wife and bore a son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. I find it fascinating that the Lord allowed it to happen, right? Don't you wonder sometimes how come the Lord allowed this to happen? I mean, that verse we read about Luke 4, to bless the poor. It's like, well, why doesn't he just prevent poverty? To provide freedom to the captives. How come God allows some people to be taken captive? Right? That's the reality of a broken world we live in. And he's not here to prevent those things. He's here to minister to us in the middle of those things. It displeased the Lord. Verse 2 Samuel now. And the Lord sent Nathan to David. This is Nathan the prophet, not the son, but Nathan to David. And Nathan came, and this is what Toby read. This is Caleb, whoever you are. Caleb read. This is good here. It says, there's two men in a city, one rich, the other poor, many flocks, one little ewe lamb. And it was like a daughter and a traveler, and he kills it and eats it. And so the story, you know the story. But Nathan has this parable that's all built around these steps of taken, killed, and eaten. And that's exactly what David has done with Bathsheba, all right? Taken that which was not his, killed Uriah, killed the soul, spirit, family, home security of Bathsheba, and the baby, dead, death, and eaten to consume Bathsheba in that way as though she's just a throwaway whatever. Taken, killed, and eaten. Then David hears this story. He's angry. He says to Nathan, that's a horrible story. As sure as the Lord lives, whoever did that deserves to die, and he shall restore the lamb fourfold because he did this thing, and he had no pity. Interesting. And then Nathan says, you're the man. No, he says, you're the man. And David's house of cards collapses. And he says, I have sinned. Look at this. Verse 2 Samuel 12, now verse 7, 8, and 9. Nathan said, you are the man. Now, before I read this, remember back in, maybe you don't, but in Deuteronomy 28, you had this whole covenant language, and I explained that when God is laying out the covenant, God goes to great lengths to explain to Israel all he's done for Israel. I guided, I fed, I protected, I gave you manna, all this. A lot of verbs like, God providing for, and in the cultural context of the covenant, that creates a sense of indebtedness on Israel's part. And in Deuteronomy, Israel is expected to remember God, be faithful to God, and put away false God. That's the whole book of Deuteronomy. Because of all God has done, respond to him and be faithful to him. Now you look at these verbs here in 2 Samuel 12, 7, 8, 9. God says to David, I anointed you. I delivered you from Saul. I gave you your master's house. And so all we're expecting now, is it too little, too much to ask that you would be faithful to me? This is an echo of the whole covenant that God has with Israel, okay? Why have you despised the word of the Lord to do what is evil in his sight? You have struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword, and has taken his wife to be your wife, killed him with the sword. Now therefore the sword shall never depart from your house, because you've despised me and taken the wife of Uriah to be your wife. Consequences are connected to sin. They just are. I wish it was different. We can choose our sin, but we cannot choose our consequences. They just unfold. You can choose your sin, but you cannot choose your consequences. We all have stories, right? We all have situations where didn't think that would happen. I thought I could get away. I didn't think anybody would find out, and whatever it is. All right. David lost. Okay, I'm trying to build the case here. Why does the sword become a fixture in David's family? Because he lost the moral authority to tell his children to do otherwise. Hey, Adonijah, you shouldn't. Whoa, right, Dad? Good one. Like you can. See that? When we sin and compromise, we lose the moral authority to guide those around us. There's ways to find forgiveness, redemption, but just when you're trying to hide it and cover it up, it doesn't work. So, another way, she suffered as a mother who lost her newborn baby. Not because of what she did, but because of what David did, all right? Maybe when, she moved in with David, she's still pregnant, and she's like, okay, that was odd and weird. My husband's dead, but this is a new life. Maybe things will get better. And no, the baby dies. David knew the baby would die because of him. Do you think Bathsheba knew? Do you think he told her? Don't know. Awkward if she found that out. David says to Nathan in verse 13, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan says, the Lord has put away your sin. You shall not die, but because you did this, you've utterly scorned the Lord. The child who is born shall die. And then Nathan went to his house. So she suffered as a mother who lost her baby. The fourth point, she suffered the threat of death under this crazy political intrigue. Years later, when David died and Solomon is supposed to be the king, but he's not really, because Adonijah, who's older than Solomon, he wants to be king. And he wants to have Abishag as a wife. Some background here. Abishag used to be part of David's concubines, his nurse when he was dying. And so the basic picture here is that Abishag was connected to the king, and if Adonijah marries Abishag, to the people, he looks like the next king. Okay? That's how it looks. And so Bathsheba, maybe she's caught up in the love story. She's like, oh, that's sweet. Okay, yes, I'll ask and see if we can do this. But she goes to Solomon and says, oh, hey, she love story. Adonijah, Abishag, it's great. And Solomon's like, no, he's making a move for the throne. That day, he kills Adonijah. He has Benaiah kill Adonijah, but still, that's the deal. And when Solomon had his brother Adonijah killed, that was the fourth of fourfold deaths in his family. Remember, David said, fourfold he shall pay back. First off, you had the child that Bathsheba bore died. Meanwhile, you had Amnon rape Absalom's sister, killed by Absalom. And the third one was Absalom fleeing, and his hair got stuck in a tree, and Joab killed him. And then here, Solomon kills Adonijah. So the sword and death just starts to become a fixture, but it's connected. These consequences aren't just random judgments that God just made up. This will be. It flows naturally from a lifestyle of deceit and values manipulation and arrogance. This is the fruit of how that lifestyle is what it produces. And that's the way all sin works, okay? So, but still, Bathsheba's in Matthew 1. She was taken, raped, widowed, taken again as a wife, lost the child, stepped into a political life and death situation, and God protected her. Bathsheba's an anomaly because there's no verb of heroic faith with Bathsheba. I looked a lot. I looked for and she prayed, and she did this thing. She's just bounced around, and she found God's blessing. She didn't earn it. She didn't do anything meritorious. She's just receiving a hard life, but she seems to be faithful to God. I mean, she's not running off the rails. It doesn't say, but I think it's fair to assume she's continuing to be faithful. She was faithful to the law before this all started, as she seems to be faithful through it all. And she experienced a deliverance. To God, our God, belongs deliverances from death. And she really experienced that. So she suffered like the other women, and she also blessed. She was blessed. One, she lost a son, but God gave her a son, another son, and this son was Solomon. All right, David comforted his wife. That comfort means to be sorry, to repent, to avenge. So David comforted his wife. Lay with her, had a son, called his name Solomon, and so this is where Solomon comes from. The Lord called his name Jedediah because it means beloved by the Lord. So even then, Bathsheba is surrounded by a context of love from God, even though all this stuff happened. Solomon can be called a rainbow baby in our culture. Sometimes, after multiple or miscarriages or loss, God gives a baby, and it's joyful because of the past and the past loss after the dark times. And so we have had a ministry here called Waiting in Hope that is infertility or struggling to have children. And so we have some connections and information with this ministry if you're interested. But infertility support ministry points to Jesus as a source of hope, encouragement, support, embracing those struggling with the grief of difficulty conceiving. So that's something that maybe the info desk, we can get you some information on that. Okay, so the second way she was blessed, she was abused as insignificant, but the love of God rose her to significance, including her in the lineage of Jesus. That's not a bad deal, even though her name's not even mentioned, okay? It's interesting. Solomon. She's the mother of the wisest man that ever lived. That's saying something. I mean, that's significant. I think if you're having a Mother's Day conference, she would be a good speaker. I mean, after all, can you do better than Solomon? Okay, maybe. Okay. So 3, another blessing. She lost the opportunity to be the mother of the baby that died, but God blessed her as the mother of Solomon, the wisest man that ever lived. This is what I'm talking about. So she lived in such a way that even though there was past in her pain, listen to this. The King Solomon deeply, deeply respects her. Listen to this little interchange in Kings. Bathsheba went to the king to speak to him on behalf of Adonijah. The king rose to meet her and bowed down to her. The king is bowing down to Bathsheba. That's unique. The king sat on his throne, had a seat brought for the king's mother, and she sat on his right. That's a position of honor and respect. That's significant, okay? So the fourth thing, she was blessed. Nathan the prophet. Through Nathan the prophet, God protected her, delivered her from death in this weird political situation with Adonijah. And this is from 1 Kings. You're going to zip through this. David's dead, and Solomon's not accepted as king. Adonijah's making a move. Remember, he wanted to marry Abishag and sneak in as king. So Nathan says to Bathsheba, "Have you not heard Adonijah has become king, and David doesn't know it?" Because this is before he's dead. But anyway, therefore, now come, let me give you some advice that you may save your life. Your life is in danger. If you don't figure this out, you will die. Because in this culture, it's super common. Whoever's king, they just kill everybody else. There's no contest for the throne. So Nathan says, go in to David, talk to him, say, "My Lord, didn't you swear Solomon shall reign after me? How come then Adonijah's king?" And then he says, okay, while you're still telling the king that, I'm going to come in and say the same thing, and then he'll get the message. So it's just, but Nathan is trying to protect her, bless her, preserve her life through this little thing. So Bathsheba goes to the king and says, "My Lord, you swore that Solomon would be king, and now he's not. Adonijah is doing this, and all the eyes of Israel on you to tell them who shall sit on the throne of the throne after you. Otherwise it will come to pass when my Lord, you, David, die and sleep with his fathers, then I and Solomon will be killed, will be counted as offenders." All right? So, I mean, it looks like Bathsheba is just not not fully aware of all the layers of political power and intrigue, and just sort of gets caught in this life and death thing. And she's like, wow, I didn't know it was going to be this complex, this messy. And yet God delivers her. Nathan is just guiding this. Hey, do you know this? You need to do this, say this. And Nathan, God moves Nathan to speak. Anyway, so as we look at Bathsheba, motherhood is a sacrifice. It's a bunch of seasons of sacrifice. Bathsheba is a mother that can relate to all mothers. I mean, she has experienced most everything. Loss of a child, pain of abuse, lost a husband, lost a family, lost a home, lost a culture, lost the protection of a home, neighbors, yet remains faithful to God and experiences God's deliverance from death. I'm really encouraged by this, especially, I think, encouraged because there is no obvious verb about, oh, she did this amazing thing. Because then we kind of think, well, she did that thing, and so now God is protecting her. But she's just bounced around like a pinball in a pinball machine, and God swoops in, protects her, and delivers her. All right? So, God sees your pain. He shares your joys. We can find joy and fulfillment no matter the messy family lives that you may find yourself in the middle of. You're never outside of the realm of God to bless you in those dreams. Whatever dreams that don't come true, whatever, you do A and B, but you don't get C, it blows up. God is in the middle of that. Remember, He doesn't prevent the poor. He doesn't prevent the captives. He is there in the middle of the suffering to give us peace and hope. He loves us like no other. And so as we went through these 4 women, Tamar, faith may not remove yesterday's pain, but it does open up tomorrow's hope. She experienced that. She was a triumph of God's grace. God is the hero of her story. Rahab, genuine faith doesn't demand perfect expression. She lied. She didn't grow up in Awana. She didn't know any better. She did what she could, and her sin of lying doesn't invalidate her faith. Then you've got Ruth. Faith doesn't change your past, where you come from, but it does change where you end up. She's a great story of transformation through the goodness of God. And Bathsheba. Faith doesn't insulate us from pain and loss. It allows us to participate in God's goodness and blessing. So I hope you have a realistic picture of what faith does and what faith doesn't. Faith doesn't make your life easy. It doesn't remove all your problems. In fact, a lot of problems would become more acute and more focused. God uses those to accomplish His purpose. Okay? So God doesn't reject the rejected. So here are a couple key questions. Do you think you have to express your faith perfectly in order to experience God's blessings or joy? You do not. This is not this is not a free card to go crazy. All right? That's an abuse of grace. But when we get all wrapped around the axle about, oh, I did this thing wrong, and that's not right, and this didn't turn out, and so God's mad at me. That's not true. He loves you. He loves me. Do you think your messed up life, family, health, finances, whatever, prohibit you from enjoying a close walk with God? These 4 women, they had issues. They had real significant issues. Things did not go well. They could have done better. But it didn't stop God's redeeming love from rescuing them from death and getting them into a place of crazy significance and redemption. At the end of the day, I bet if you saw these women 30 years later, there still would have been warts and bumps and like, oh, I thought you'd be perfect now. No, right? I don't know. We'll get to heaven, we can have that interview. All right. So this is what I want to close with. God doesn't reject the rejected. Faith doesn't insulate you from pain and loss, but it does allow us to participate in God's goodness and His blessing. And that's good news. We need that news because our world's a broken world. And Mother's Day sometimes is super painful because of all that didn't happen or happened wrong. And we just need to know that God is right in the middle of that, and He can redeem and bless and deliver. All right? Lord, thank you for being a God that redeems, blesses, and delivers. We celebrate these women because we celebrate you. Your grace is amazing, and it's so good that these women are in this list of the genealogy of Jesus because it's not really natural or normal We kind of are curious about that, and the more we dig into it, we find that there's hope. It's a message of hope that you came for the people that you came through, and that means you came for us as well. Thank you for that. Amen.